Editing Danny here, and I would just like to say, very sorry, the audio on this one, not as good as the first episode, so please bear with it. I would very much appreciate it. I will leave past Danny with you now. Goodbye. Hello there. My name is Danny, and this is Ale and Agony. First and foremost, may I just say a huge thank you to those of you who have listened so far. Across all platforms, there have been over 60 listens on episode 1. And I can't believe it. I was hoping for, 10 optimistically. I thought that would be nice. But over 60, that's pretty bloody good. And I want to raise my glass in particular to the wonderful people who left 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, because I got 2. The first one is from user Anal Beads, and they say, "Wonderful podcast and great attention to the details." Thanks, Anal Beads. The second review is from LRPW1302, and they say, "I follow this account on Instagram and so thought I'd give it a listen, and I'm glad I did. It is fabulous. Danny's vocalization and storytelling is absolutely brilliant, and personally cannot wait for episode 2. Well, LRPW1302, here we are. Also, massive thank you to my first 2 patrons, because last week I made a mistake on the tier cost, for which I apologise. The tier cost is £3 per month and not £1 per month, but I just want to say thank you to Brett and to Jonas for becoming my very first patrons ever and supporting the podcast so early on. So I have been celebrating, and I do love a cheeky can of beer, and today I am partaking in a can of Brewdogs Planet IPA, which is a new one to me, and I did sign up to Brewdog's monthly subscription box where you get 2 of their beers and then you get 2 more from 2 other breweries. So it's an awesome way to discover new drinks, and I don't have to leave my home. I'm not sponsored, unfortunately, but I will let you know. You can get your first box for the cost of shipping only, so it's less than £4 and you get 8 beers. And next month, they've advertised that there's going to be a collaboration with Tony Chocolonely, and it's going to be a white chocolate and raspberry milkshake IPA. And I know that's going to divide some of you, but I personally am very intrigued. So whilst I sip away on my Planet IPA, I'll be telling you a story that was requested by my friend's wife, and it is about Natalie Hemming. So let's crack it open. General warning for this episode, as I will be talking about murder, but there aren't too many gory details in this one. I think it's important that we take things back a fair few steps, because this story is about Natalie and her partner, Paul, and I think that we should go back to when they met. So Natalie was a mother of 1 when she met Paul Hemming in a local supermarket in 2007. And I've always wondered how that would work, because I'm just envisioning myself, at Tesco's, messy bun in leggings and a big baggy jumper. I'm picking up some pizza and some cat food. And then I bump into someone somehow, and I manage to strike up a conversation that I hit it off so much that I give them my phone number and then decide to meet up afterwards. I mean, has this happened to anyone that's listening or anyone you know? Because it really intrigues me. I don't know how that would happen. Natalie's sisters later described the relationship as being super quick. They moved in together within 6 months, and when they met Paul for the first time, they said he gave off some weird vibes and he was quite socially awkward. So normally when you would meet someone's family for the first time, you want to make a really good first impression. I'd imagine you want to, make a round of teas, sit down in the living room, get to know them, kind of really sell yourself to the family. But instead, when they arrived, Paul just excused himself and said he needed to go and get changed. And then he went upstairs, and then he didn't come back down. Natalie and Paul went on to have 2 more children together. And from the outside, they looked like they had a lovely life together. They had the kids, a large detached home, nice cars. But the odd behaviours continued, as Paul didn't go to his own children's baptisms. And later on down the line, He then cancelled the venue that they had booked for their wedding without telling Natalie. And it appears that Paul was using marriage as a dangling carrot for Natalie to keep control over her throughout their relationship. And he would use the promise of marriage to bribe her when things got tough. And I've personally sort of struggled with that concept because marriage to me isn't particularly a big deal. Whereas I know to some people it's a massive amount of commitment and it's kind of like the next step. Whereas I feel like if someone said to me, fine, I won't marry you, I'd be like, all right. There are many documented records of Paul's aggression towards Natalie, and there was an assault that she reported to the police in the year that they met in 2007, where Natalie's ex had sent her a text to say happy birthday. And I personally have had texts from my exes on my birthday, so I don't see anything wrong with that. But Paul grabbed her phone in a jealous rage and launched it at Natalie's head. She put her hand up to the point where she had been hit, and her hand came away covered in blood. She begged Paul to call an ambulance or to take her to A&E, and at first, Paul refused. Instead, he pinned her down on the bed and gently choked her. And I feel weird saying it like that, but the report was that he put his hands on her throat and squeezed lightly, and the term gently choked her seemed a bit more appropriate than tenderly. Paul squeezed and said if she ever told anyone what he had done, he would kill her. He then reluctantly took her to A&E, and this report would go on to be retracted by Natalie, and she said to the police that she and Paul wanted to continue to work on their relationship, and she asked for the report to be dismissed. 6 years later, in 2013, another assault occurred, and Paul poked Natalie in the eye and smashed a bottle in rage during an argument. So she made a report to the police, and this time she left with her kids and she travelled 160 miles away to go to Yorkshire and to stay with her sister. But Paul followed her. And her sister Joanne said at first he would just show up on random weekends to see the kids. And then it would start being every weekend. And then he was bringing up marriage again, and he was telling Natalie that he'll get a better job and that they would get married. So Natalie packed up the kids and she went back to Milton Keynes with Paul. Natalie's eldest child, Kirsty, who was 12 at the time of her murder, has since told her story about living with Paul. Paul would lose his temper over the smallest thing, and there were multiple naughty corners in the house. And one time that Kirsty recalls was when she left an apple in her school bag, and Paul found it when it was starting to go soft. And I remember when I was a kid, I once found a pack of sandwiches, I'm pretty sure they were jam sandwiches, right at the bottom of my rucksack, and they were full-on furry, super grim. And it's easily done when you're just chucking a load of books into your bag and you forget about them as they get squished under everything else. But Paul was so outraged by this small, innocent mistake that he made Kirsty stand in one of the naughty corners for over 13 hours straight. And he even came downstairs during the night to make sure she hadn't fallen asleep or sat down. So this all happened overnight, so Natalie must have been aware of this behaviour, and Kirsty said that she didn't dare tell anyone what was going on because Paul would hurt her mum. So it seems like domestic abuse was present and regular in the house, and it certainly wasn't being hidden from the children. But how did her family not see the signs? Her sisters lived far away, and Natalie was really cagey about telling her family about her relationship problems and never really discussed it. So her family just thought Paul was this weird, awkward guy and never thought that their issues went past general relationship arguments. If there's no marks on Natalie or the children and no one saying anything, then they are none the wiser. Another 6 years go by, and now 31-year-old Natalie makes the final decision to leave Paul. And I can't find anything that would suggest why she made this decision. There doesn't appear to be anything that Paul does. There's not a final outburst or anything. She just texts her friend on the 24th of April to say that today was the day that she was going to finish things. And her family say that as far as they knew, it was amicable. Paul was looking for a flat, and he was helping Natalie find a home for her and the kids. And then they were going to rent out their detached home in Milton Keynes. So it was a fresh start for everybody. But Natalie was also starting to form a relationship with her colleague, Simon. And it said that he was sweet to her, and he brought her coffee during their shifts together, and they went out on lunches together. Natalie felt really special and genuinely cared for the first time in years. Her and Simon also exchanged texts about falling in love with each other, so it was pretty serious. If at the end of April they're sending each other these messages proclaiming their love for each other, and only a week earlier she had decided that enough is enough and she was going to leave Paul, perhaps the reason she had decided to leave was that she found this love with Simon, and she realised that she was worth a lot more than being with this guy. I don't know how long the relationship with Simon had formed, but things were really starting to look up for Natalie. And on the last day of April in 2016, Natalie drove to her mum Margaret's house and dropped off her 3 children for the night and told her mum that she was going out with some friends. But in reality, Simon came to Margaret's house and picked up Natalie for a date. And they had booked a hotel room so they could spend the night together. I understand why she didn't tell her mum, as she was likely going to be told that she shouldn't jump from one relationship to the next. But she was falling in love with Simon, and I can imagine that night away together was a huge deal to them. And during the evening, at Margaret's house, one of the children just would not settle, so she calls Paul for some help. And when Paul gets there, he sees that Natalie's car is still there. So where is she? Margaret says she's out with friends for the night, because that's what Natalie told her, and that's what she believes. The following morning, on May 1st, Natalie and Simon are seen together outside of the hotel CCTV after their night together. They're walking and holding hands. They seem super happy, and then Natalie reaches up to give Simon a kiss. He drops her back off at Margaret's house so she can collect the children, and then Natalie heads off home at around 1:30 p.m. And unknown to Margaret, this is the last time that she will see her daughter Natalie alive. A few days later, on the 4th of May, Margaret starts to get worried as her and Natalie talk every day, and she isn't picking up the phone, and she hasn't done for a few days. She checks in with her other children, and they also can't get hold of Natalie. So they drive to her home, and Paul tells the family that he doesn't know where Natalie is. So Margaret calls 999.
Thames Valley Police, Suzanne speaking. How can I help?
Yes, my love. My daughter's been missing for 48 hours. We have just been up to Milton Keynes to her partner, and he says he doesn't know where she is.
Okay, alright. Well, can I take your daughter's name, please?
It's Natalie Hemming, Hemming. It's worrying me because it's not like her.
So, what's the specific concern that's caused you to call the police?
Him.
The police head over to Natalie's home that evening to talk to Paul so they can figure out where she may have gone. And they routinely ask to have a look around the property. I assume they want to see what she left behind. You know, has she left her purse? Has she left her phone or her keys? Are there any clues to where she may have gone? And you can see from the officer's body cam footage that Paul is super reluctant to let them look around the house. He says that, you know, you could wake up the children, and if they wake up, then that's it. They won't go back to sleep, and it's going to cause a big problem for him. One of the officers calmly reminds Paul that they are there to help find his missing girlfriend and the mother of his children, and it's really important that they take a look around. So he eventually shows them around the house, trying to be quiet so he doesn't wake the kids, and then they sit him down on the sofa and ask if they can take his mobile phone for examination. Paul immediately asks, well, how long are you going to have it for? And he then says, well, what if Natalie calls me? I need my phone. So he refuses to give it up. Standard procedure in these situations is to interview the children. So the following day, Paul and Natalie's 6-year-old son Evan was interviewed and recalls the night of Natalie's murder. He said that he went downstairs after he heard a big crash, like thunder, and he heard glass smashing, and he looked through a gap in the door and he saw Mummy laying on the floor in the living room. Daddy then took the big red rug that was in the living room to work because it needed to be cleaned. Evan then drew a sketch of the living room and marked certain areas where he remembered seeing dark patches. A few days later, on the 5th of May, police brought Paul in for questioning, and he starts the interview off crying, wiping his eyes constantly. He wipes his eyes so much that you can't see any tears at all. He said that on the 1st of May, the day after Natalie had spent the night away, she came into the kitchen where he was cooking dinner for the family, and she seemed really down and not herself. So Paul gave her a cuddle, he kissed her cheekbone, and then he kissed her forehead, and he asked her what was wrong, and he said he rubbed his finger against her temple because she really liked that, making himself out to be super gentle and sensitive. Natalie told Paul that she really didn't enjoy last night, that something had happened. So Paul asked her what was wrong, and Natalie tells him that she's been flirting with a colleague at work, and Paul said he knew all about that. He said, "That doesn't matter, we'll just put it all in the past and start fresh." And that Natalie had said that when she went back to Simon's house, he had kept pushing her to take it further and further, and she got so panicked that she just gave in, and Paul says that Simon raped Natalie. This does contradict the text message that Natalie sent her best friend the morning after she slept with Simon, where she said, and I quote, "OMG, amazing. We had sex 3 times. Lucky bitch." So pause. Paul is really trying to paint this perfect picture of himself. He stood over the hob, cooking up a lovely family meal. I imagine he's wearing an apron. He's being sensitive with his kisses and his cuddles. And this man had launched a phone at her head over a text message from her ex, and he had smashed bottles in rage. And here she is, telling him that she'd been flirting with her colleague, and he's just super chill, loving, and understanding. I don't buy it. The police officers then ask Paul how he felt when he found out about the rape. And he said he felt like he let her down. Again, trying to paint this perfect picture. He felt like he let her down. So he didn't feel any anger towards Simon. He didn't want to go over to his house, kick the shit out of him. He didn't want to defend Natalie or call the police. He is essentially trying to throw all of this onto Simon, because if Simon raped Natalie the night before she went missing, it's a pretty good diversion from Paul. Paul then says that Natalie said she really needed to get away. And he said, "No worries, I'll look after the kids. You get away for a few days, clear your head." And he told the police that he went upstairs, brushed his teeth, washed his face, and went to sleep at the same time as the kids at 6:50 p.m. And when he woke up, Natalie just wasn't there. So 2 things. First off, what happened to dinner? He was over the hob, cooking a lovely family meal. And then he finds out this awful news that his partner tells him. And then what? Just, never mind, screw dinner, I'm going to bed, see you later. And secondly, he doesn't follow up. He just says, "Yeah, don't worry about it. You go clear your head." He doesn't check, where are you going? Do you need anything from me? Maybe you should stay here. None of that at all. And going to bed at 6:50 p.m. as a grown-ass man. No, you don't. No one does that. No. The officers then ask Paul if he went anywhere that evening. He said no. Did he have to see to the children in the night? Nope. Did he leave the house at any point? Nope. But Paul's car registration is picked up on 2 cameras. One at 22:16 p.m. on the 1st of May. So this is after Natalie confides in him about the rape and then leaves to clear her head. And then again at 6 minutes past midnight on the 2nd of May. The car had purposefully been driven down the back roads, which should have had less cameras. The police then asked Paul how it was possible that his car was caught on multiple cameras if he was home all night. Paul immediately switches from sweet and sensitive to stone cold and replies with, "No comment." Then they tell Paul about Evan's interview and the big red rug that went missing. And they ask him, "Did you remove the rug from the living room?" No comment. And if so, why did you do that? No comment. And in my opinion, Paul looks quite shaken in the interview at this stage, and he's often glancing over to his lawyer for backup. After the first interview with Paul, a further investigation into the home showed that there were spots of blood on the corner of the coffee table, just like Evan had drew in his sketch. And it shows that this blood was Natalie's. They also found red fibres in the boot of Paul's car that would match the big red rug that had gone missing from the living room, along with more traces of Natalie's blood in the car boot. The following day is day 3 of the investigation, so 3 days after Margaret calls 999, and the case went from a high-risk missing person to a murder inquiry. The evidence was stacking up against Paul. There was the affair that Natalie was having with Simon, there was Evan's interview, the big missing red rug, the blood found in the living room, the blood and the fibres found in the car. All that was missing was Natalie's body. The police believed that Paul murdered Natalie on the night of the 1st of May, and he knew what he was doing as he turned off his mobile phone and he left it at home so it couldn't be tracked. But luckily, his car was caught on the traffic cameras, and they assumed that Paul dumped Natalie's body somewhere along his driving route. So they bring Paul in for his second interview to try and get a confession, as at this point, the clock is ticking, and they need to charge him. They ask him about the blood in the car, and he says, "Well, it could be mine or it could be Natalie's, as we both use the car." They then ask him about the blood on the coffee table, and Paul said that Natalie's complained about getting cuts on the corner of that coffee table loads of times, and so has he, so it could be his blood or Natalie's blood. They ask, "Where do you believe Natalie to be?" And Paul says, "I have no idea." He says he is very concerned about Natalie, and he knows in his heart that she isn't dead, and he wishes that she could just walk through the front door, but he can't make miracles happen. The police don't buy a single word, and Paul is then charged with Natalie's murder, and he maintains his innocence and states, "I am not guilty." When I watched the episode of Catching a Killer on this case, when an officer called Dale was called to be told that they'd been authorised to charge Paul with murder, his response was, "Wallop, yes." And I can't help but chuckle because that's just like such a British response, just, "Oh yeah, wallop." The next day, police receive a call from a passerby who said that they had previously saw a dark hatchback, and it matched Paul's car's description, parked at the side of the road near the disused railway lines, and it had the car boot open. She reported that it was parked at an odd angle, and she saw a man walking by the disused railway. The police jump on this lead, and a full team of searchers covered the area to find traces of Natalie. The area itself was massive, and they were looking for her clothes or any signs of her body. Then a helicopter overhead spotted a manhole cover that had been opened, and it was the perfect spot to hide a body. One of the officers climbs down into the hole, but Natalie is not found. And they continued combing this area for 3 more days, but they don't find anything. 6 days later, a passerby reports that they previously saw a dark car parked opposite their home for a long time near the fields, and that was very unusual. So this sparks a fresh search for Natalie in the area. But once again, nothing is found. And I feel really bad for Margaret and the rest of the family because they get updated throughout this whole investigation. So they get updated to be told, "We found someone that saw a car and it was parked really weird and we're going to go search the area." And then, "Oh, sorry, 3 days later, we haven't found anything." And then another week goes by, and then, oh, we've had another person that said that they saw someone very suspicious, so we're going to search that area. And then again, nothing's found. Like, it's just ups and downs, because all they want at this point is Natalie's body so that they can progress with a funeral. Another 6 days go by, and a man calls the police and reports that whilst he was mowing the lawn, he's found a naked body in the bushes on the side of the road near his home. At first, he thought it was an animal, but then he saw feet, and Natalie was found naked and face down in the bushes. She had been there for 3 weeks and had decomposed past the point of requesting the family to ID her, but the DNA confirmed that this was Natalie. So now that they had Natalie's body, the family had some form of closure and they progressed with the funeral. And after that, it was time for the trial. And Natalie's family was pushing for the charge to be murder. And throughout the entirety of this investigation, Paul has done nothing but say that he was innocent. However, on the morning of the trial, they were told that Paul has confessed, but to manslaughter. He said that he and Natalie got into a row, and he threw a Fabergé egg at her head, which knocked her out, and the death was an accident. I mean, I don't know much about Fabergé eggs. I'm not a connoisseur, but I always thought they were quite expensive and rare and really fancy. And if I was in the middle of a row with someone, I'm not going to pick up my fancy Fabergé egg. I feel like, I don't know, pick up a mobile phone. Natalie's mother, Margaret, said, "If it had been an accident and he'd called an ambulance, I think I could have forgiven him, but to strip her body and dump her naked and leave the children alone for hours, I never expected that he would be capable of murder. I knew he had a violent temper and split personality, but I never thought he'd go that far." In reality, it looks like Paul found out about Natalie and Simon. Potentially, he could have looked through her messages, and if he saw that text that said, "Oh my God, amazing, we had sex 3 times," he would completely lose it. And he probably did throw things at her, as Evan said that he heard glass smashing downstairs. But Paul likely beat Natalie to death, and the autopsy report showed that Natalie had a fracture on her right temple and a break in her arm and defensive wounds on her hands and arms. The pathologist at the trial said it was impossible to say exactly what caused her death because of the advanced state of decomposition. During the trial, one of Paul's ex-girlfriends came forward and told the police that Paul was really controlling. He started hitting her quite early on, and he would spit in her face and humiliate her in front of her friends, and he would force her to have sex with him, and he told her that the only way that she would leave him is in her grave. I don't know how she escaped, but she was bloody lucky. Paul received a life sentence for the murder of Natalie, with a minimum of 25 years in prison, and Paul showed zero remorse during the trial. And as he was being escorted away, the sick bastard mouthed to Natalie's family, "I loved every minute." What a prick. One of the things that I found frustrating about this case was that Natalie had reported her abuse to the police multiple times, and her withdrawing her statements were not at all unusual of a domestic abuse victim. And I know from personal experiences, as I know people who have been beaten by their partner and then been convinced to go back to them. So why was this never followed up? No one called her to see how things were going. No one called by the home. They knew that there were children in the house. And I don't know if this just isn't the procedure or if it was a cluster of errors by the police. I don't know. But when you hear about Paul's ex-girlfriend and his threats of putting her in a grave, and then his control over Natalie and threatening to kill her, it seems inevitable that he would go on to murder someone. Natalie's children are now living with their aunties in Yorkshire, and they will be in their 20s when Paul is eligible for parole. Kirsty, who is the oldest child, hopes to help other youngsters experiencing domestic abuse. She is trained to be a domestic abuse ambassador at her school. She is also a patron of Operation Encompass, a partnership that sees police inform schools when they have attended a domestic abuse incident in a child's home so that immediate support can be given to the children at school. And what a badass kid, taking a horrific childhood and doing so much good with what she has learnt from it. And that, my friend, is the story of Natalie Hemming. That was a bit of a shit one, wasn't it? If you would like to learn more about this case, I do really recommend the episode of Catching a Killer called Searching for Natalie Hemming, which is on Channel 4's website. It shows you the interview footage with Paul and Evan, the body cam footage from the police officers, and it's heavily focused on Natalie's family. I found it really interesting because you get to see how they update the family throughout the entire investigation. There is another documentary which was filmed after Catching a Killer, which I found on YouTube, called Natalie Hemming Crime Case Documentary by a channel called Real Crime DNA, and I will put a link to both of these in the show notes. But let's take it back to the very beginning. How was my ale? I know you're dying to know. Well, this one is a super pale ale. It's called Planet Pale Ale, so it's not lying. And I would definitely classify this as a session ale for sure. It's lovely and refreshing, and I had mine ice cold. Totally could see myself out in the hammock in the garden with the sun shining, pale ale in hand, listening to a cheeky podcast and cooking up a tan. It's also 4.2%, so it's nice and manageable. Plus it comes in the little stubby cans. It's not as citrusy as the Jaipur I had last week, but I've always thought that Jaipur has a very concentrated hoppiness to it. But this one is still delicious. You can find updates about new episodes over on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll be sure to post some photos of this case over on the Instagram page, and you can find both of those pages under Ale and Agony. If you have some spare cash and you want to throw it at me and support the show, then you can find me on Patreon, also under Ale and Agony. I would of course be super grateful for any feedback and maybe some more cheeky 5-star reviews over on Apple Podcasts. If you drop a review, I will read it out for you next episode. Maybe choose a different name to anal beads though. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and well done on getting to the end. And I hope to catch you in the next episode. Goodbye, my friends.